Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.
Hafaday Zandiro, welcome to Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry. Earlier in our show, historian Dawn Farrell was lamenting the fact that the CNMI archives were not really used to their full potential, basically. And today I'm happy to report that there is an ongoing project that's going to change that. Our guests today are Arthur De Oro, Director of Community Development Institute at Northern Marianas College, and also ethnographer and oral historian Rlene Santos Steffy. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Tito. Thank you.
So tell us, Arturo, what is the CNMI Archive Digitization Project? Big word for what sounds might be like a big project. What is it all about?
I know that's a mouthful, but it is a project that the CNMI Archives, through Perry Pangilinan, the then Director of Library Services, wanted to have available to the public. And this collection of interviews of Manamku right around the 1990s has been sitting there at the college, and we wanted to make it available to the public for research, for families to get in touch with the history of their families. And so this collection, through the digitization, will now be available to the public on our website once we complete the grant.
So tell us a little bit more about these interviews. Who conducted them and why were they conducted?
They were conducted by then archivist Herbert Del Rosario, and this is a labor of love on his part in collecting these stories. And so we're really proud of the work that he did, and we're continuing that work at the college through this project. So we want to make it available, and now with the help of Rlene Steffy, the oral historian on the project, we now have a really good direction on how we can make this available.
Rlene, welcome back.
Nice to be back. Thank you, Catherine.
Always nice to have you in studio with us. What is your role in the project?
Well, I received a phone call from Perry Pangilinan, and Perry says, "Hey, we want to digitize the oral histories that Herbert collected while he was here. Would you be willing to be the scholar on the project?" And I said, absolutely.
Great. So how much video are we talking about? How many, what is the state of the video before you guys started working on it?
Okay, good question. According to the master list that I was provided, there are 127 oral histories that have been interviewed, are in the list. I can't say that those are individual 127, or there might have been a follow-up interview of the 127. I did not catalog them to say if there were duplicate interviews. But I believe there might be a few multiple interviews, not a lot. Having said that, I received 97 of the 127, and in that when that was provided with the 97, some of the transference or the digitization of the interviews did not convey the audio. So that's part of what Art is talking about in the completion of the grant. They need to be redigitized in order to be analyzed. I can't analyze no sound. I need to hear it. Accordingly, it appears from my review of the documentation that there was an effort to transcribe as well as translate. So all these interviews are in Chamorro. Every single interview is in the Chamorro language. They involved Carolinian Chamorro ancestry, and as well as Chamorro, just non-Carolinian, but just Chamorro. So it's a wonderful collection of Chamorro language spoken here in the Northern Marianas. And I say that because it's not just Saipan Chamorro Carolinians, but also there were samplings in Tinian and in Luta.
Were you at all able to find out what spurred Herbert Rosario to do these interviews in the first place?
Yes, it was really heartwarming to learn that, because in my review of the documentation provided by the college as well as the Humanities Council, I was not able to determine the impetus. Like, what did he wake up one morning and say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to collect these interviews? Obviously, oral history at this point had come to his attention. How it came to his attention, we found out yesterday in the second lecture I presented at the college, because Lino Olipai, your uncle, showed up. And I was explaining that I was not able to determine that fact. And that's critical because we want to know, how did this start? I mean, there's always a beginning, right?
Yeah.
And why? Well, Lino Olipai shared in the lecture that he was working with the aging community and brought to Herbert's attention, we need to collect these stories before these elders die, because he was working with them and listening to their stories, and he brought to the attention of De Rosario. So before Herbert actually applied for the grant for equipment, he hit the road because he felt that time was of the essence. These people were in their 70s and 80s, and I believe they're all deceased today. So he really struck, and having gone out, apparently only attended one oral history workshop. I don't know where or who conducted it. He was armed with very little, but collected a lot of information. And so that was what I had to analyze. And Thursday night, we presented the collection of as many as we could, a 45-minute presentation of the video. I found the thread in the interviews, having listened to every one of them that had sound. I did not read transcriptions or translations because those are secondary sources. And if the person who translates or transcribes the interview just by hearing it loses a lot of the interpretation by not being there. So I don't trust translation, transcription if the person's not the one that conducted it. So I had to listen to every single one of them real time. If it was 20 minutes, I had to listen to 20 minutes. And then I had to spend time going back and forth trying to figure out what he was talking about. And that was time consuming. A total of 2 months work in completion. And then we've created a video documentary of the presentation, a story not included in my grant, by the way, Catherine. This is just something I did because
Thank you, Rlene.
This is what I love to do.
You love to do.
Yeah.
So this documentary is about the process of this project, or is it about focusing on the interviews?
It's about the interviews.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You said you found a thread.
Yes.
By that, do you mean like a common thread, like what Uncle Herbert was aiming towards?
Absolutely.
And what is the thread?
Well, you'll have to view it yourself.
I love that. So, Arthur, I imagine you've had a lot of partnerships. Who has actually been working on the project or supporting the project other than you two?
Well, it would not have come to fruition if it wasn't from the help of the Northern Marianas Humanities Council. They saw fit that this project is right in line with their strategic plans, and so mainly the funding was from them, and this taking it out of the archives is really this is a great cultural resource for anyone doing any research and anyone wanting to find out about their family history. So it's mainly an internal project with the college, but now we're seeking help with continuing. There's a lot more where this came from. He also collected music of the Northern Marianas, and so that would be the next step in what we're going to try to accomplish in digitizing those files and then making them available.
Can I share that the video, we will put it on YouTube. So, because we can't burn it on a DVD, it's productive, counterproductive rather. And so, because YouTube is easily accessible to the world, we will put it on YouTube with the same credit lines for the Humanities Council and the college, even though it's an Rlene Live production.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about the what you mean when you say digitization. For those who may not understand, what was the original status of these interviews, and what is the end product going to look like?
Right. When Perry and I talked in the beginning, he was really concerned that the VHS tapes, the beta tapes, and the super VHS tapes are deteriorating in their present state, and they won't last too much longer. So by taking them and then now converting them into a digital file, it would be preserved for eternity. And now that it will be available on the cloud in our we have a server just dedicated for this material, and this is a great start for the archives to now make available all of their collections. So this is the beginning of what the archives will be able to provide to the public.
I can't believe the college still has a beta machine. That is unreal.
No, we no longer have that material.
So how are you
equipment?
How are you doing the
actual
transfer?
tapes? Well, we haven't done the betas yet. We're still working on the VHS ones.
Still looking for a beta machine to digitize it.
And actually a super VHS player, because the files that Arlene was talking about with no audio, those were recorded on super VHS, and then when we tried to play them and record them digitally, that's where the sound was lost.
So if any of your listeners have those two machines, a Betamax machine and the Super VS, contact Dioro at the college and let him borrow the machine, because it's critical. So there were 35 altogether, also in addition to the non-audio transference that we're not able to digitize. So that might be on beta, right?
Yes.
Okay, or DAT.
How many hours of interviews? I know estimated. Maybe you don't know how long the betas are, but estimated. How many hours of interview are we looking at here?
I did not break down the hours.
Oh.
You know, Catherine, when I'm listening to oral history, I'm in a totally different world. I really am lost in the stories. And so I'm really bad about cataloging my time. I can tell you that from the time I started to the time I was done, it was about 2 months, including weekends and nighttime.
Wow.
Yeah, because, for example, if I was to review this, if this was on video and I was to review this interview, I would have to listen to the entirety first, right? Then I go back and then I listen to the entirety again. But the second time I'm listening to it, I'm writing down
being analytical.
Yes,
yeah.
I'm starting to analyze it. And then I go back a third time and listen to each of those segments. So I'll identify the subject. Let's say we talk about, like the archives, and then we're talking about the oral history. So those are subjects within and contained within that interview. So I will break that down and then try to group, if there was something that came up later. Memory triggers memory. Mm-hmm. So they might forget something or not able to tell him something in the beginning, but remember it throughout or later. Mm-hmm. Then I have to throw that back into the first part. So there's a lot of time stamping that goes on, and that's where the thread comes in. What are they talking about throughout? Now, he had a questionnaire that he created. I don't know where that question came from, perhaps in consultation with Lino. But he did say, for example, what can you tell me about life before the war? And not necessarily in those terms or in those words. Then, were you educated during the Japanese occupation? And of course, it's all in tomorrow. What kind of economy did they have during the Japanese occupation? And this is all pre-war. And then, did you survive the war? Were you here? Where did you hide? I think is what he asked. Mano ni manatto kamzugi tempungera. Where did you hide during the war? And so that would draw that out. And so there's a lot more that could be done with this collection. I only presented the overall theme and tone and feel of the collection, the people that he selected, what they had to say about the subject matters. So that's basically what it's about. So it's their story.
And Herbert even traveled as far as Australia to gather these stories.
Really?
To track the migration or the out-migration of those Chamorros that went to Yap, and then to Papua New Guinea, and then finally to where they live now, their descendants in Australia.
Yeah, what happened there was David Sablan, his father Elias,
Yes.
okay, had traveled to PNG for the South Pacific Conference and found his niece, who is the mother of Michael Asanuma, and stayed with them and reconnected. And that's when they found out that they had relatives here in the Northern Marianas. And so Michael Asanuma and Beverly Barter and Michael's daughter Jackie came to Saipan and reconnected with family. And Herbert and my cousin Mike Fleming and a couple of people at the college went down for a reunion that happens every year since they moved to Australia and became Australian nationals. They had this reunion, and so they went down. As this reunion was occurring, David Sablan Jr., who's a golf partner of mine for 10 years, was on my show at Arlene Live at K57, and we were talking about this reunion. His father was down there. We called them and connected at that moment. So for me, bringing this back and being the scholar on the project is just a full circle.
Bit of your history coming back to you.
Absolutely.
This is Your Humanities Half Hour.
Did you know that you can donate up to $5,000 to the Humanities Council through the CNMI Education Tax Credit Program? Donations from individuals and corporations qualify and can be used to offset your local wage and salary tax, BGRT, and earnings tax. Call our office at 235-4785 to see how you can support humanities programs in our community and obtain a tax credit for your donation. Sizuus Maasi, Olomai, and thank you.
Welcome back to Your Humanities Half Hour. We're speaking about the CNMI Archives Digitization Project. Arthur, what has it meant to you personally to be a part of this project?
Well, it gives us a chance to really see how oral history can continue with these interviews, because on this list of people that were interviewed, you can find out about your grandparents, your uncle, your aunts, and how it was for them living before the war, during the war, and what they had to say about culture and life in the Northern Marianas as they were in their twilight years and reflecting what life was like here. So one that really struck out to me was my good friend and classmate Harry Blanco's dad, being because he always talks about his dad, his education, and how he was the first Chamorro boy to have gone to Japan to be educated there, and then his life coming back and becoming I think it was a councilman after the war. So he's very proud of the heritage that and the legacy of his father. And so I got to see the interview and see him talk, and so it really hits home with me with that, because now I can put the face and the voice to Harry's stories.
You have a spreadsheet there in front of you. What's on it? Looks very detailed.
Yes, these are the list of interviewees, what number the tape was, the date of their interview, where they were interviewed, what village they were at, Herbert's name because he was the interviewer, what other documents like the transcription or if it was translated, and then what's on the video, and then also their date of birth. So this document itself is a resource for anyone trying to do research on their family history or about prominent people or people that were living here during the time of the war.
Yeah, what we need to complete the form with is their date of birth, date of death. it's not complete to that. I didn't put that in the video because I have no idea. I tried looking up on the internet the obituary in the newspaper, and I was not able to find a lot of them. One person that's in this collection was former Justice Ramon Garrido Villagomez. And unfortunately for the CNMI, this man died pretty young. In the collection, there are also Carolinian Chamorros with who don't have the prestigious status of a justice, but contribute so much to the historic information, right? And so there can be a lot of projects that can come out of this assigned from schools, whether they're elementary, middle school, high school, or college, to expand on these stories. Get the second generation interviews. What is it like to be a child of a Carolinian Chamorro and adjusting to American life? All of these individuals who came here had become American citizens in the compact, right? Or in the the Constitution change. That's another subject that it can expand to. So for me, from a scholastic part, that is expansive. From a personal reflection, my mother was born and raised here in Saipan, as you know. My mother survived World War II here in Saipan. And when I listened to the interview with Juana Diaz, when I listened to the interview with Juana Diaz, she mentioned being in a bokungo at their home and then going to Tun Hussein Duenas' property and joined them in a bokungo there. So it shows that these families had built bokungos in their ranch areas.
Wait, what is a bokungo?
It's a place to hide. Bokungo is a hiding place under the ground or in the cave. Yeah?
Okay.
So they all build these shelters, these bomb shelters is what they are. And then at some point, something occurs that causes them to think they better move. And so they moved to somebody else's and joined this family, Duenas family. At the very same time, my grandparents moved their family from their ranch to that same bokungo. So when I'm listening to this interview, all of a sudden this story is coming to life for me. It's like, wait, I've heard this story before. And so Juana is describing what happens and how her father, her sister, and a brother died in that bombardment period. I immediately turned off the video, called my mom, and I said, Mom, ko untungus unhasumam si Juanan Diaz? And of course, you know, my mom's 86, right? And she said, Juanan Diaz, nangkafan? And I said, Mom, ekungo kisturanya, listen to her story. When I played it for my mom, she said, ay, ina nu hagantun something, right? And then I said, it's your father who told them that the war was over because he had heard it from someone else, and they all came out. Now, I said, Mom, this is so big for me because it validates Tata being in Saipan. And she said to me, validates? You don't believe what I told you? He has birth record, you know, but I said, no, Mom, that's not what I'm saying. Oral history collection, when you collect the memories of people, each of the persons that are collected validates somebody else's story. And then when you interview, which is not something that I could detect that Herbert did, he didn't have any field notes for me to review. So if, for example, I interview Catherine Perry, and I interview her about being on the radio for umpteen years for the humanities, after that interview, I would ask the interviewee, who else can you recommend that I speak to about this subject? And so they become sources for other people that have some knowledge of that topic, and then there you have a collective memory that you can draw from. And so that's what happens. And so my mom said, Mom, don't be offended. Mga piniti. But, you know, for me, it just like, ooh, it jumped out at me, right? And so that's my personal take on this. It had a personal meaning for me because of that. And then also with the Australians, when I flew down to Australia, my husband had a meeting in Sydney, and I said, listen, since we're going to be in Sydney, may I stay extra 2 weeks and interview the Yap Chamorro descendants? And he said, absolutely. So I stayed at Beverly Barter's house for 2 weeks, and she drove me around, and I interviewed many of the same people and more. So we have I have a broader collection and more in-depth than what they were able to collect at the reunion.
So for those that would be interested in using this material in the future, how will they be able to access it? You mentioned the video documentary of the interviews will be posted on YouTube, but for students, for family members that might like to see the interviews, what is this going to look like when you guys are done?
Yes, we'll have a link on our Northern Marianas College homepage about the collection in the archives, and then we're in the process of building the homepage for the archives.
Oh,
so when they click on that link and go to the archives homepage, all the interviews, the videos will be available for them to watch and view from the archives. So that's part of the grant, and we're working on that to complete that project.
And what is the timeline we're looking at?
Well, our goal right now is to have it done by December.
Oh, okay.
And so as soon as we find those super VHS players and finish the conversion of those files, I already saw the web page. It looks great, and I've used some of the files on that. So we're just working out the kinks and being able to have access for the public.
Now, we visited Scott Russell at the Humanities Council, and my recommendation was that they don't put the raw data on the websites because the time-consuming process. For families who want to watch it, they want to watch. There's a lot of editing that needs to be done in these interviews. It's a lot of time that just runs on it. And so for the general public, that's not, it's like raw data. You need to edit that to put it up. Now, of course, the college is the one that's going to have to ultimately decide that. But if you go to websites, universally, if you go to websites that have oral history interviews, they do not run raw data for obvious reasons. It's raw data. Everything, you don't put your draft on the newspaper, right? You don't put the unrecorded, unedited recordings of your interviews on the radio. That's just not done. It's not finished. So, but there are values to all the collection, and if somebody I think wants to listen to the entirety from start to finish, they can come to the college and do it. But on the website, I don't think that'd be appropriate. There isn't anything, by the way, Catherine, in any of these interviews that is that shouldn't be viewed, or there wasn't a single person who said, I do not want this for public viewing. So everything that Herbert Rosario was able to collect is for public scrutiny.
Well, our guests today have been Rlene Santos Steffy, ethnographer and oral historian, and Arthur De Oro, director of the Community Development Institute at NMC. Any final thoughts before we go?
You first.
Yes, we want to thank the Northern Marianas Humanities Council for helping us now bring this collection to life, and also our IT department for all the late nights and all the great work that they've done just to digitize the project. And so we want to let the public know that the Northern Marianas College and the CNMI Archives is working on bringing more of this type of collection to the public for viewing, for use for research, and for just to document the history of the Northern Marianas.
I can't promote oral history enough, and that's because it's living testimonies.
Well, thank you so much for being here today, and most especially for the work you're doing. I'm imagining Christmas time family gatherings, and hopefully, if there's fingers crossed, people having the opportunity to hear from their relatives.
Powerful impact for Mrs. Del Rosario and her daughter when they heard and saw Herbert Del Rosario on video and listen to his voice. He's been dead for 3 years. It's overwhelming. It is, people still grieving loss, right? Grieving is a never-ending loss, and to be able to see them. So very impacting collection at the college.
This has been Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry.
This program was supported by a We the People grant awarded to the Northern Marianas Humanities Council from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities or the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.